Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. This is our January continuation of our new law webinars that we've been doing throughout most of 2023. We are spilling a little bit into 2024 as well. Today, we're going to be covering certificates of rent paid and renters credits. So we're joined by a whole bunch of folks. Both from the Minnesota Budget Project and the Minnesota Department of Revenue. My name is Rachel Sterling. I'm with Homeline, your humble host, and we will be getting started here in just a minute. I apologize for getting us started a little bit late today, but we will be getting started here in probably just about 30 seconds, just letting folks kind of trickle in first before we start in on quite a bit of information to share. So again, for those just joining, this is our January episode series of the series, if you want to call it episodes, rendition, iteration, what have you, of our new law webinar series. And again, today we'll be covering certificates of rent paid and renters credits. I have a couple pieces of housekeeping here. So let's go ahead. I see that we have kind of slowed down on the people entering in. So let's get going. So in case this is your first time with us, Homeline, again, we are a nonprofit that helps tenants throughout the state of Minnesota kind of navigate what their rights are under Minnesota tenant landlord law. We offer free legal, educational, and advocacy services. We've been around since 1992, and we have served over 300,000 renters in that time. We do offer our services in 4 languages, English, Somali, Hmong, and Spanish. We also have an email option as well. Those are all those various numbers there on your screen. Also want to mention that we do have more upcoming webinars. We are going to continue on with this even. So what's coming up next is February 21st. We will be covering our proposed landlord tenant law reforms that will be coming up during the 2024 legislative session. So you can go to our website, homelinemn.org, to get more information on how to register for that. Again, it will be free. It's going to be the same time, Wednesday, February 21st, 1:30 to 3 p.m. We're going to be joined by our policy director, Michael Dahl, and our policy attorney, Larry McDonough, which if you have been on any of these webinars before, you will know that Larry has been a frequent flyer in hosting many of these, as has Michael. So again, they will be covering proposed reforms for the 2024 legislative session. And you can go to our website, homelinemn.org, to get some more information on how to register for that. This session is being recorded, just as a heads up. We will be posting it to our website in a couple of days once we get it all on the cloud and off the cloud. We'll also be posting a PDF version of the slides that you'll see today. Not everything that you'll see will be in a slide format today, so the video will also be very helpful. So then if you have questions that are coming through or anything that comes up, we do have some pre-submitted questions that we'll be getting to. But if you have anything that comes up during the session today, please, please, please use the Q&A function that is located at the bottom of your Zoom window. The chat, I'll be putting in lots of links and things in the chat, and so I will almost certainly miss any questions that come through there. I will feel badly about it afterwards, but if you want your question to be seen, use the Q&A function, please, at the bottom of your screen. Please. Thank you. This is not a CLE credit webinar. Some of our webinars do have CLE credits. For those of you who are attorneys, you will know what I'm talking about, but this particular session is not a CLE credit session. All right. That is enough housekeeping from me. I'm going to turn it over to Nan Men, who's with the Minnesota Budget Project, and they are going to give us a kind of quick and insightful course on renters credits. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. For folks who are not familiar with the Minnesota Budget Project, we do nonpartisan policy and advocacy in the areas of tax, budget, and economic policy to make Minnesota a place where everyone can thrive And we are a program of the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. And I really appreciate our long partnership with Homeline, advocating on policy issues, tax policy issues impacting renters. I'm going to talk about today some policies impacting the renter's credit that were enacted in the 2023 tax bill. A one-time boost in 2023 and some big changes coming in 2025. I'll talk about the benefits of those changes and some challenges to pay attention to so that we avoid unintended negative consequences for renters. So Rachel, if we can go to the next slide. I'll first just do an overview about the renter's credit. It's one of the tools that the state uses to bring down the cost of housing so that more Minnesotans can have safe, affordable homes for themselves and their families. It's also part of creating a more equitable tax system and essentially puts a limit on how big a share of their family budget that lower income renters will pay towards funding public services through their property taxes. The renter's credit is a property tax refund paid by the state to low and moderate income renters that takes into account their income, family size, and how much they have paid in rent. There is an analogous property tax refund for homeowners as well. Certainly, while the owners of rental housing are responsible for paying the property tax bill, the renter's credit recognizes that renters are contributing to paying the property tax bill through their rents. And for purposes of calculating the renter's credit, 17% of the rent paid is considered the renter's share of property taxes. And the landlord's role is to provide the CRP that renters use to document their rent paid. And that's a key document for filing for the renter's credit. In 2021, nearly 300,000 Minnesota households received the renter's credit. The average refund, this is a one-time annual refund, and the average is $731. Over 60% of folks who got the renter's credit have incomes of $40,000 or less, so it's very targeted to low-income folks. And about 30% of the recipients are seniors or people living with severe disabilities. And then the process currently to apply for the renter's credit is through the property tax refund application, which is separate from the state's income tax filing system. That's something that's changing in 2025. So if we can go to the next slide, the changes that happened in the 2023 tax bill, folks might have noticed if you filed in 2020 for 2023, there'll be a one-time about 21% increase in refund amounts, which will mean $48 million more in refunds to renters and an average increase of $155. That's just a one-time bump. 2024 is back to normal, and then in 2025 is when the big changes happen, changing the process and timing to file by making it part of the income tax system and simplifying the definition of income that is used to calculate the renter's credit. These are changes that or initiatives that came out of the policy process from the legislature. And I think the main thing these changes are seeking to do is to increase participation, because there's a fair number of folks who qualify for the renter's credit but aren't successfully applying for it and receiving it. So the idea being, if you put it on the income tax form, more people will be aware of it. And there'll be a broader set of tax filing infrastructure supporting people to file for their renter's credit. And also by making it simpler, we're going to leave behind a unique and complicated definition of income, which is another barrier that keeps folks from getting the renter's credit they qualify for. So if we can go to the next slide. So starting in 2025, and this table kind of gives you kind of a bit of a before and after, so what it is now and what we're going to change to. So as I mentioned, now folks apply through a separate property tax refund process. Starting in the 2025 calendar year, folks will apply for their renter's credit on the state income tax form. So instead of being technically called the renter property tax refund, it'll become the renter income tax credit. The renter's credit on the income tax form will largely have the same formula and eligibility rules, but the big change is what definition of income is used to determine eligibility and credit amounts. And also, so that change in income is, instead of household income, we're going to use adjusted gross income, which is what most other things in the tax code are based on. It'll make it a lot simpler to apply for and for the department to process. I won't go into all the complicated things about what household income is, but just to know that the current instructions include 1 to 2 pages of examples of various types of income that are not part of people's usual tax filing, that you either have to include or not include in household income. It's very hard for folks to understand. Sometimes it's kinds of incomes that it's hard to document. And when this bill was heard in the legislature, one of the legislators talked about, she didn't know she was supposed to add in the value of her scholarships for college, and got tripped up and ended up with a renter's credit she had to pay back. So it's really hard to understand and comply with. So adjusted gross income makes it a lot easier. And then there'll be a timing change. So by moving out of this separate property tax refund process, where applications are due August 15th and the refunds are paid in the summer and fall, by moving it onto the income tax form, then applications will be due by April 15th and refunds typically paid in the spring. So those are some of the big changes on the renter's side. And I'll just note, homeowners will continue to use the separate property tax refund process for filing their state property tax refunds. So if we go to the next slide, some of the positive impacts of these changes to the renter's credit that'll happen in 2025. Overall, it's $135 million annual overall increase in cash resources to renters. So a lot of new dollars going towards renters who are struggling to make ends meet. More people are expected to apply for and receive the refunds. The estimate from Department of Revenue that there's just under 120,000 renters who are currently eligible but not claiming the credit, but are expected to start getting it once it's on the income tax form. And then in addition, about 33,000 households will become newly eligible because of the change in income definition. Also, about half of the renters who currently get their renter's credit are expected to get a larger credit than they do now. That's because adjusted gross income tends to be lower than household income. And then, like I said, simpler to apply for, simpler to process, and renters will get their resources sooner. There are some challenges and things we need to pay attention to. So folks who do successfully use the current system are really used to filing later in the year and getting their renter's credit checks in the late summer and fall. And we hear often people have very specific things that they are used to spending that money on. We'll really need to make sure folks understand that that check is not coming in the fall, that they got it earlier in the year. And one of the challenges for folks knowing that is, instead of getting a separate check for their renter's refund, it'll be just included in their overall income tax refund. Secondly, then, folks who currently only file for the renter's credit, who aren't used to income tax filing, will need to make that transition. And there are about 5% of folks who will get smaller credits than they do now, because the change in income is disadvantages them. And the estimate is those folks will see an average $64 smaller renter's credit. All right, if we have the next slide. So this slide is just my contact info, and also has our website address where you can find some more information about the renter's credit. And I will also drop into the chat links to our 2 major analytical pieces that we have with more information about the renter's credit.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Nan, for that. I am going to also, if you can drop your contact information in the chat, because I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. But before we do that, I think something that's important for this particular section from Angela is a question about, can you explain income? Are renters going to have to use the renter's credit as income?
Could you repeat that question, please?
Sorry, yes.
Yeah.
So Angela is wondering, can you explain income? Are renters going to have to use the renter's credit as income?
Well, they have to use it as income. So basically the change that is being made is for any kind of tax policy there is a definition of what is your income, and that will determine whether you qualify for the credit and how much you might qualify for. There, we now will use a simpler definition of income, the same definition of income that's used on the income tax form. I think one other thing that maybe this question might be getting at is that I'll mention is that for the most part, tax refunds do not count as income against other kinds of assistance programs. So that is something I'll lift up. So I'm not exactly sure about what other contexts where people might have to use it as income, but it does come, back as a refund check. And so those are dollars that folks can use
Yeah.
for their expenses.
And I think just for clarification, I think you explained this well before, but just to clarify,
Mhm.
it's always complicated, I think, when we're dealing with taxes and tax years, since
Yep,
we're talking about, right now we're starting to talk about what we did back in 2023, but we're filing in 2024, and the changes that people are going to see with how they're filing don't actually take place until next year, even though it's about the rent that they paid for this year. Like, so I always find the swirl of years can get slightly complicated, right? So,
yep,
but ultimately, the thought is that next year when people are filing their taxes, um, the renter's credit, if they are entitled to one, they will get that as part of just their refund if they get a refund from, I'm assuming, the state.
that's right. It's a refund from the state. So yes, let's underline the year. So this year, people will file for their renter's credit on the property tax refund form. That's due in August 15th, same as they've been doing all along. And then when we hit 2025 calendar year, people will file for their renter's credit on their state income tax form. That folks generally is due on April 15th. But the good thing is that, um, people can always file after that deadline, and there's no penalty if you're just getting a refund, if there's not taxes owed. So if people miss that income tax filing deadline and realize it later, they will still have time later in the year to get those returns in and file their refunds.
Got you. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
All right, so this is a good transition. I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to invite Jake to uh, share his screen, and Jessica, Delsit, if you want to also start. Also, I know, so there was I'm being told that there's an error in the training registration for our February training. I apologize for that. I will fix that after this webinar. If you go to the hyperlink that is in the first paragraph of that page that I linked to, that link does work. So in the first paragraph, there's a hyperlink in the word here. You can use that to register for February's thing, and then I will go and fix the longer one here in after the webinar is done, just so that I don't mess things up too badly, going between lots of screens here. So, but thank you for letting me know, everybody. I will sort that out. All right. So without further ado, we've got the Minnesota Department of Revenue. Jessica Delsit is going to give us some fantastic information about certificates of rent paid. So this is a slightly different, essentially the other side of that same renter's credit coin. So the renter's credit is what tenants get, and the certificate of rents paid are kind of what the landlords are doing to facilitate that renter's credit. And so now we're going to kind of switch viewpoints into this is changes that are coming for landlords and what that really entails. So Jessica, thank you very much for joining us, and take it away.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks for inviting us to be here with you today. As Rachel said, if you have any questions, just go ahead and drop them in the Q&A, and we'll do our best to get those answered for you all today. Our agenda today, I'm going to define what a certificate of rent paid is, why it exists, and then how it's calculated. And then I'm going to review what landlords are required to do when it comes to a CRP or certificate of rent paid. And then I'm going to go over how to complete the CRP and report that rent paid. And I'm going to end by sharing some resources with you today. So as Rachel said, my name is Jessica Delcid, and I'm the Volunteer Outreach Coordinator at the Minnesota Department of Revenue. So I educate volunteers of the VITA and TCE free tax preparation programs where people can go and get their taxes completed for free if they qualify. Just a quick disclaimer, but information in this presentation is based on the laws in effect when it was written, so it does not supersede or alter any provision of Minnesota laws, administrative rules, court cases, or revenue notices. Again, this is the agenda that I've already gone over, so I'm just going to move on from there. All right, a certificate of rent paid, or a CRP. That is a form that property owners or managing agents are going to provide to their tenants. It's issued as proof of payment that rent was paid during that rental period. And then the CRP is going to be needed for any Minnesota residents or part-year residents so that they can apply for the renter's property tax refund. A certificate of rent paid, it's going to be calculated on several different factors. So there's the property information, the rent details, and the total rent that was paid. And I'll go into each of those here and let you know what they are. So the property information, that's going to be filled out whether it's an adult foster care, assisted living facility, intermediate care facility, a nursing home, mobile home, or mobile lot. And that's also going to be the spot where you're going to fill in the property ID or the parcel number and list the number of units that are on that property. The rent details, that's going to be for you to list if the rent was paid by medical assistance or Minnesota Housing Support, which is formerly Group Residential Housing, or GRH. And you're also going to list the amount that was received for those programs. And the total rent paid, that's going to be the amount paid by the renter in 2023. So if there's multiple renters in a unit, you need to split that rent evenly between all renters. And that's also the area where you can list out if there's a caretaker rent reduction that is received. Managing agents, they act on behalf of the property owner. Property owners and managing agents who rent living space to someone, they must issue a CRP to their tenants if either of these apply. So if any property tax was payable on the property in 2023, or if you're not required to pay property tax, but you made payments in lieu of property taxes. And a CRP must be issued to each adult renter by January 31st or the end of this month. So you do have 2 weeks remaining to issue them to your tenants if you haven't already. Cooperatives or co-ops, those do not need to be issued a CRP because they are considered homeowners. But if it's a nursing home, an adult foster care home, intermediate care facility, an assisted living, or other healthcare facility, you're going to want to go out to our website and in the search box, type in landlords, because that's going to pull up more information for you on how to file for one of these facilities. Where can you get CRP forms and instructions? Well, if you're going to file on paper, you can download the CRP and the instructions on our website, which is listed here. In the search box, just type in landlords, and you'll be able to find the forms there. Or you can file electronically. You just log into your e-services account. If you don't have an e-services account, Patrick is going to talk to you about that a little bit after me here. And then our e-services account, that is free for you to use, and it's on our website. It's available for you. Who must get a CRP? You must provide a separate CRP to each adult renter who lived in the rental unit in 2023. So if there's more than one adult renter in a unit, you have to show that each individual paid an equal amount. You're only going to have one name on the CRP. And if it's a married couple, they must receive a separate CRP showing an equal amount of rent paid. As I mentioned already, CRPs are due by the end of this month. So you want to make sure in the next 2 weeks you get those out to your tenants. You can give a CRP to your renter either as an electronic copy, so you can email it to them, or as a hard copy, so print it out and hand it to them. If a renter moves out before December 31st of the year, you can always give them a CRP early. Otherwise, again, they are due out to that tenant by the end of this month, January 31st. If you don't have a forwarding address for a tenant, you can just use their last known address. If you do not give CRPs to your renters, we can assess a $100 penalty for each CRP that has not been issued. And you must issue a CRP for rent actually paid, even if the renter owes back rent. If you overstate the amount of rent constituting property tax, we can assess a $100 penalty or 50% of the overstatement, whichever is greater. And then you're going to want to keep a copy of your 2023 CRPs until February 1st of 2027. So hold on to them for a couple of years. Next slide. All right, at this time, I'm going to walk you through each section of the CRP and how to complete it. So our first section is the renter and unit information. On that first line to the right, you see where it says electronic certificate number or ECN. You only need to fill that in for an electronically filed CRP. So if you're doing this in e-services, it's going to automatically create that number for you. If you are not creating CRPs in e-services, then you're just going to leave that ECN field blank. You are going to want to make sure you fill out all the other fields here because that is important that we know the renter's information. And then CRPs are going to need to be created in e-services beginning with rent paid in 2024. So again, not till next year, 2025. And then Patrick will go over more information about how to complete CRPs in e-services. The next section is the property information. So you're only going to check one of these boxes if they apply. So if you have someone who is living in an apartment, you're not going to check any of those boxes. You can just leave those blank. But you do want to include the property ID or the parcel number and the number of units on the property. Next section is rent details. So line A is talking about medical assistance, and that covers medical expenses of low-income Minnesotans. So if medical assistance paid any rent on behalf of a tenant, then you're going to check the yes box and enter the total amount that was paid. And line B is Minnesota Housing Support, which is formerly Group Residential Housing or GRH. So same thing applies here. If any Minnesota Housing Support was received on behalf of a tenant, go ahead and check the yes box and enter the amount that was received. Next up is the total rent section. So line 1 is the total rent paid by the renter in 2023. If there's multiple renters in a unit, keep in mind that you have to split that rent equally between all of the renters. I'm going to talk more about what constitute rent on line 1. So we're going to come back to lines 2 and 3 here momentarily. Next, yep. So what's included as rent on line 1? Rent is the amount of rent paid for the right to occupy a rental unit as the renter's principal residence, even if the amount is not stated in a rental unit. So things that you're going to include are amounts paid by medical assistance, Minnesota Housing Support, again, formerly Group Residential Housing or GRH, or any vendor payments received from the state or the county. It includes for a garage, a parking space, or a storage locker, provided that that is part of the rental agreement. For any utilities or pet deposits, but only if those are included as part of the rent as well. Anything by the city due to relocation or by the Department of Employment and Economic Security for services for the blind. Rent does not include on line 1 a damage deposit unless that is being used to pay rent, any late charges or fees, rent paid after December 31st of 2023, utilities if they're paid separately from the rent, any charges for medical services, or charges for food, laundry, or other amenities that are not provided as part of the rental agreement. The value of free rent provided as an incentive to rent the unit. A garage or a separate structure that's not provided as part of a rental agreement, and any rent paid for farmland. So those items do not go on line 1. Also, rent does not include emergency rental assistance. So that includes, but is not limited to, any COVID-19 emergency rental assistance, or from the Rent Help Minnesota program. So if the landlord receives money directly from that program, you do not include it on line 1 as rent. It also does not include rent paid by a federal government housing agency or federal programs such as your Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program or HUD. It does not include rent paid by charitable organizations or rent paid directly to the landlord by persons not living in the unit, such as any family members or friends. If your family or friend gives you money directly to pay your rent, then that would be included on line 1 as rent. All right, back to this section. Line number 2 is the caretaker rent reduction. So if the renter paid a reduced rent in exchange for being a caretaker, you'll enter the amount of the reduction on line number 2. And I have a quick example here. So if rent is reduced by $200 a month for caretaking duties, and the tenant lived there for 12 months, you're going to take 12 months times $200, which is $2,400, and that's the amount that would go on line 2. But keep in mind that that rent reduction needs to be reduced or split up on each individual in the unit. And then line 3, you're going to add lines 1 and 2 for the total amount of rent paid in 2023. The next section is the property owner section. So if there's a managing agent who completes the CRP, they're going to list the property owner and address in this section. And the property owner is ultimately responsible for CRPs, even if it's submitted by a managing agent. And then the sign here section, basically whoever is signing or completing the CRP is going to sign and date this right here. There's resources that are available to you. So we've got our website listed here. Again, in the search box, you're just going to type in landlords, and that'll bring you to a bunch of information. And then this webinar is also being recorded, so you can always watch it over the next couple of weeks if you're working on your CRPs. And then if you have any additional questions on how to complete a certificate of rent paid that we're not able to answer for you today, you can always call us at this phone number or send us an email, and we'll get back to you with a response. All right, now that you've got some basic knowledge and terminology, I'm going to pass it over to Jake, and he's going to go over more of the big picture.
Thanks, Jessica. Good afternoon, everybody. As you said, my name is Jake Fenice. I supervise a team of outreach coordinators and communication specialists over at the Department of Revenue. Our team mostly focuses on supporting folks filing individual income taxes and the property tax refund. So for my brief portion of today's presentation from Revenue, I'm going to be taking us back in time to look through everything that's happened over the last 7 years related to the Minnesota property tax refund and CRPs. Our story begins in 2016. So at the time, Revenue offered a free Minnesota property tax refund filing option through our e-services system. This was only available to homeowners and still is only available to homeowners. So back then and even today, we're often asked why the system is not available to renters. And one of the biggest reasons for that comes down to our ability to verify information submitted on that return from some other trusted source. So in the case of homeowners, we get information from counties across the state every year with information that we can use to verify these claims on those property tax refund forms. Things like who owns the property, how much tax did they pay, and so on. And this is what gives Revenue what we need to feel comfortable opening the door to individuals using this system to file their property tax refund. On the renter side of things, really only the relevant piece back in 2016 is that landlords are required to submit CRPs to tenants. The same is true today, as you've heard from previous speakers. However, they are not required to submit copies of CRPs that they create to Revenue, at least not yet. So we knew back in 2016 that providing this service to homeowners and not renters created a tax equity issue. And we were really determined to find a solution that allowed renters to use this as a free filing option. So to get us there, we needed to somehow obtain CRP information from landlords. So let's hop in our DeLorean and travel again through time, and we find ourselves towards the end of 2017. So during the 2017 Minnesota legislative session, a new law allowed Revenue to require landlords to submit copies of CRPs to us. This was sort of the first brick that we needed to lay to start building that foundation that allows renters to use this system to file. We knew we wanted this additional verification from landlords, and this is how we were going to get it. So fast forward a couple of years. During this time gap between 2017 and 2019, Revenue began the work to bring this vision of 2016 to reality. So really what that means is like a lot of meetings and heads spinning around trying to figure out how to make this all work. When we were finally ready, we launched a new feature in e-services that allowed business customers to submit CRPs to us. And the reason that I highlighted business customers in the PowerPoint is because as of 2019, individual taxpayers could not register and use e-services to manage their tax filings. Only business customers who have obtained a federal tax ID number could actually register and submit CRPs to us. At the time, again, someone with a social security number or an individual taxpayer identification number or ITIN could not register and access e-services. So our project team uncovered sort of a technical issue in law that forced us to head back to the legislature to finalize one piece of this puzzle. We resolved that in 2021 by advocating for a new law during session allowing revenue to require taxpayer IDs during the registration process. And this new law gave us the authority we needed to update our system and allow individuals to begin registering with their social security numbers in e-services. This meant we could enhance our system and allow landlords across the state, all landlords across the state, to register and submit CRPs to us using this system. And here we go again, back in the time machine, jumping forward to the more current state of things. After another year of planning and some project work, Revenue launched another new feature in e-services in late 2023 that allowed individuals to register to submit CRPs. The system went live at the end of December and has been in place for folks creating and submitting 2023 CRPs to us before the January 31st deadline that you've been hearing about. So for this year, keep in mind, there's still no requirement to use e-services to create and submit CRPs. Just to be clear on that, landlords are still required to issue CRPs to their tenants, right? We don't want that to get lost in translation. They just don't need to use e-services to generate them. So this is the part where I'll briefly highlight some of what's to come, and Nan did a great job sort of highlighting some of what has already happened. So I'll skim through this at best. During this calendar year, we're going to be working to transition the renter's portion of the property tax refund to the individual income tax return. 2023 will be the last year that renters will use the M1PR property tax refund form to file for their renter's credit. You know, one of the biggest reasons that we're making this change is, as you heard from Nan, is based on some research that we did that shows tens of thousands of people across the state that have been missing out on this valuable tax credit for years, even though they're filing income tax returns every year. So the thought behind this transition is a more simplified filing process for renters. Make all of your claims on one form at the same time of year on the individual income tax return. And that brings us to 2025. So next calendar year, the renter's portion of the property tax refund will be claimed on Form M1. In addition, all landlords who own and rent property in Minnesota who must issue CRPs to their tenants must use e-services to submit 2024 CRPs to revenue. So over the next year, we are working towards these goals and supporting folks with the transition, doing a lot of things like this, getting out into the community and trying to share as much as we can ahead of those requirements. We've got a lot of stuff to communicate, a lot of important information to a wide range of folks who call themselves or consider themselves landlords. It also includes renters who are going to be going through a major transition with us next year. So before I close out and invite the next speaker, Pat, I wanted to say, you know, obviously this is going to be a year of some transition for folks. Pretty much all stakeholders involved in this program, including us. So we're going to be doing our best to communicate these changes in as many places as we can. I invite you to share feedback with us along the way. We want to make sure these new tools and resources can be integrated into your processes, no matter if you rent a basement bedroom or if you manage 1,000 units of a high rise. So I'm going to turn it over to Pat, who is going to walk through a short demonstration of e-services and the CRP submission process. Take it away, Pat.
Thanks, Jake. Hopefully you can see my PowerPoint and hear me now. Forgive the little fluff of hair there. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pat Donahue. I am the e-services training coordinator at the Minnesota Department of Revenue. You've received a lot of great information already from my colleagues, Jessica and Jake and Nan as well. But this afternoon, we'll take a break from PowerPoint and show you what it really looks like in e-services when you're submitting these CRPs. So my goal, our agenda, we'll spend a little bit of time sharing how you can register in e-services. And then we will look at, all right, it's time for me to submit, to create these CRPs, how you can do that. You can import them. You can also manually enter them. And then I'll show you a few of the kind of housekeeping items, how you can change a CRP, how you can search for them, as well as how you can print and provide those to your tenants. All right. So as mentioned, businesses, individual landlords, all of those users can access e-services from the Minnesota Department of Revenue's website. So revenue.state.mn.us. I believe my good friend Matt is going to be throwing some of these links in the chat as well. But to access e-services, whether you're a business or an individual landlord, you'll select this login to e-services link. And I'm going to be using a testing environment this afternoon. So once you click that login link, if you are new to e-services, there is a create a username link. And then there's two different options. If you're a business and the business is associated with the rental property, you should still use e-services as a business. So in order to set that up, you will need a Minnesota ID number. However, this is our new area where if you're an individual landlord, you can create your username from here. So we'll do that in just a moment. But I just want to point out a few great resources for you from our Department of Revenue main page. If I just search for CRP, and there's a link for CRP information for landlords. As Jake and Jessica have said, we've been communicating a lot of this stuff out already. We have a lot more to communicate over the next year. We've been doing lots of presentations, getting lots of questions. So we have a ton of information on our website about the CRP process. For example, we have create CRPs using e-services. We have a little information there about how you can log in to e-services, how you can create an account. If you're an individual, you'll need a social security number or an ITIN, as well as a refund or amount due from the last 3 years of your tax return. We've done some training already, similar to what we're doing this afternoon. We have some recordings available if you'd like to use those. Off to the right, under related content, you'll find this on every page. The first one I want to point out is e-services account types. And this might help if you're kind of unsure like which e-services account you should create. If you're a business or if you're an individual or a tax professional, each of these areas you can expand and they give you more information. So if it's a business, if the rental property is associated with the business, you should use your e-services account for a business. If you're a tax professional, if you already have a business e-services account, you should use that account. And then finally, if you're an individual, you should create and use an individual account if you are either an individual rental property owner or an individual managing agent who's helping a property owner for free. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through the process of signing up for e-services as if you were an individual landlord. So from here, I'm going to click the create an individual username. And then all of our e-services systems kind of mimic our, or I shouldn't say our, they mimic the Domino's pizza tracker. So if you've ordered pizza online, you know, it'll say, all right, your order's submitted. We're putting the sauce on it. A little bit later, it'll say the toppings are there. Now it's in the oven. Now it's being delivered. That's kind of the analogy we use. There's a progress bar that will walk you through the steps. So as an individual, you will need your social security number or ITIN, as well as the refund or amount due from either your income tax or property tax refund from the last 3 years. I will then click next. There's a privacy notice that I have to agree to. Click next. And here's where I'm going to enter my information as an individual landlord. So I'm going to say I am Cersei Baratheon, very kind individual landlord. I'm then going to put in my social security number. It asks the question, have you filed an income tax or property tax refund with Minnesota in the last 3 years? We'll say yes. And you guessed it, I'm going to hit the next button. Now I have to enter that return data. So I'm going to choose my income tax for the year 2021. Remember, it has to be just from the last 3 years. And the amount of the refund on my return was $1,323. I then click next. It asks, do you need to issue a Minnesota CRP to a renter? I will select yes. Are you a property owner or a managing agent? I am going to say I am a property owner. And now I have to create my username and password. So I will just say my username is PatD123. I will then put in a password. My secret question. And then I have to enter my name, phone number. Again, this is all fake data that I'm using this afternoon, as well as an email address. Then going to click next. And at the top of my pizza tracker thing here, we've got, I'm in the summary screen. So it looks like my name, my email, my phone number, and username are listed. That looks good. I will click submit. And then it can take up to 1 business day. Normally it's pretty much real time, but as soon as you submit, you'll get a confirmation page. You can click OK. And then if you return to the login screen, here you could log in with that same username and password. So I am going to log in as just a different individual landlord. And welcome to e-services. Again, individuals are going to see different information in e-services than a business might. So Morticia is our individual landlord. There's kind of 2 tabs, the alerts. This will display any CRP related messages. And then there's the I want to tab. This is where most of the information relevant to Morticia is found. They can search for previous requests. You even have the option to send the department a message. If you have questions about CRPs, you can send and view messages. But where we will be hanging out this afternoon is in this certificate of rent paid tile. So here's where you can submit CRPs as well as search. Before we do that, I just want to show you the profile. If I select Manage My Profile, here's where I can update my name or email. If I'd like to change my password, I can. I can set up two-step verification so that I receive, when I'm trying to log in, I can get a verification code via text or email, just an extra layer of security, as well as, again, from the I want to, here's another place you can cancel your online access if needed, as well as view and send messages. All right, but what we're most interested in this afternoon is, all right, I've created an e-services account. I'm a landlord. How do I create these CRPs to give to my tenants? So from the I want to tab, I will select the Submit CRPs. And I'm going to, again, we've got our Domino's pizza tracker. I'm going to choose the year. So I will go with 2021. And there are two ways. I can import or I can manually enter. So let's start by showing you the import. This is especially useful if you have lots of properties that you'd like to submit. If you only have a single duplex, perhaps you might find that manually entering is easier. But I will choose import and then next. Our website, we have a link here with formats for CRP imports. So if I click Certificate of Rent Paid, we have a template that you can use. It's just an Excel document. We have an example file. And it sort of looks like this. So it's got all the headings for you, as well as this is an example one, but this is also what the template looks like as well. So if you need help with that, this is a great place for you to get your file to start that for the first time. To actually import, I'm going to choose the Import Your Data button and then choose File. And forgive me, I'm going to locate my file. All right, so here's the file that I created. I'm then going to hit OK. And you'll notice I get a result here that says your file contains errors. Correct the errors and upload the file again. And down below, it tells me exactly where and what those errors are. It's saying in row 2 and 5, it looks like I'm missing a first name as well as a last name. And also I'm missing a rental address in my file. So I would then return to my Excel document, fix all of those errors, anything that's missing, and then I'm just simply going to re-import. So I'm kind of cheating this afternoon. We'll pretend like I already went back and fixed it. So then when I re-import that file, I get the green check mark saying it was successful. I'll click next. it provides me a summary of everything that was in that file. I can see that there was 9 CRPs in that file. There's 2 different properties. That's a great thing about importing, is if you own multiple properties, you can do them all on the same file. So here we have Sammy is at 501 First Street, as well as Jenny and Will. But then I also have some tenants on Maple Avenue. So it pulls all of the information from the file. I then click Next. I have to acknowledge that everything is true. I then have to sign it. And now I have a submit button instead of next, so I know that I'm getting close. I'll click submit. It gives me a confirmation screen. And down below, actually right from here, I can view the CRPs. If I select the print CRPs button, this takes that file that I generated and it automatically creates CRPs for each of those renters. So here's the one for Sammy. I can scroll down. Here's Jenny's, Will's, all 9 of the CRPs. Again, I still would need to mail or email or provide these to these tenants. Right now, it's just helping me generate them in order to give it to those renters. So that's one way that you can get the CRPs. I'll show you another way in just a minute. But now let's return. And I'm going to show you how you manually enter. So I will click Submit CRPs again. And this time I will choose 2022 as the year. And I'm going to enter them manually. I then have to enter the mailing address for the property. So we will say it's 600 North Robert Street. I know watching the data entry is very exciting, as well as the property ID. So I'm going to say the property ID is 147788. There are 2 units. There's a question, is any of the property used for adult foster care, assisted living, or nursing home? I will say no for now. I then click Next. Now I have to enter as the property owner, I have to enter my information. I have to verify that address. If I were a managing agent, there's some information here for that, but Morticia is the property owner. All right, so far I have chosen that I'm doing this manually. I've entered the rental information as well as the property owner. I click Next. And now finally I get to enter the renter's information. I'm going to click the Add a Renter. And this is where I'm going to manually put that renter's information. So we'll say it's Joe Renter. He rented this property for all of 2022. So I'll say from January through December 31st for a total of 12 months. Joe is the only adult living in this unit. Just like Jessica pointed out earlier, we still have all of the fields for mobile homes, medical assistance, housing support, if any of that is relevant. The total rent, I will just say it was $5,000. That automatically updates the rent paid. I then click add. And now I can see Joe's entry. As I mentioned before, the manual entry, you can only do it for one address at a time. So here, if I wanted to add another tenant at the same property, I could go in and add that person. But if it was a totally different address, I would need to repeat this entire process for the new address, or use that the importing feature. Click the next button. It gives me a summary of the number of CRPs. If you ever need to make a change, I could hit the little pencil icon and update that. Again, I have to acknowledge and sign, just like I did for the importing. Then I click submit. If I wanted to view that CRP right away, I can select this Print CRPs button. And that will open the CRP that I created for Joe with all of the information on it. All right, so that was submitting CRPs. Again, that's from I want to submit CRPs. You choose your year, and then either importing it with a file or doing the old-fashioned kind of data entry way. I can search for CRPs that I just submitted by using the search for CRPs link. There's lots of different ways that you can search. You can search by a renter's name, the ECN number, a confirmation number. If you know exactly kind of a time frame when you submitted it, you can search by submitted from and to, as well as the calendar year. So if I choose 2021 for the calendar year and then search, this will open a list of all of the CRPs that I submitted for 2021. To view them, you'll notice Sammy and Wilbert and Jenny, they all have the same confirmation number. And that is because I imported them all in that same file. So if I click any of the confirmation numbers here, this one, it's for Sammy. If I click Sammy's confirmation number and then print, just like I saw before on the confirmation screen, this again pulls up all of those CRPs that I could print and provide to my tenant. So that's how I can mass search or print. If I was only interested in viewing Sammy's CRP, I would just select the ECN link on the left. I'll click that. And now it will only open a CRP just for Sammy. So again, if you want to view all of them in one spot, you click the confirmation number. If you only want to view a single renter's CRP, you would select the ECN. All right. And finally, you can always change or fix these CRPs. If you realize you made a typo, to do that, you'd select the change link. And then that opens, in this case, it's for Will. So let's say that maybe I just put in the wrong renter's amount. I'm going to update that to $2,000. Click next. I again have to acknowledge it and sign. And now if I look at those search results, Will's confirmation number is now slightly different. It's no longer a part of that import file that I originally did. His ECN is new. And if I select this, I can now see the CRP for Will for $2,000. All right, I've been talking an awful lot today. Hopefully that was, I know that was quick, but just to kind of reinforce it, once you sign up for e-services, you go to I want to, you can submit the CRPs, you choose your year, whether you're going to import them with a file or manually. And then you let our pizza tracker walk you through. And then you can always search for previous CRPs to then provide to our taxpayers or to your tenants. Just to kind of reiterate, right now, this isn't set up to like send these to any tenants. It's just a way for you to populate the CRPs. You will then still have to provide them to your renters, just like you do currently. And as Jake said, this isn't required for this year, but next year we will require that landlords use e-services. Anything else? Again, our website, if you search for CRP information for landlords. We even have an FAQs topic. It's got information on what software can I use, stuff about importing. So hopefully I was able to provide you with a good intro this afternoon, but rest assured our website is filled with good information as well.
Awesome. Thank you
That is
so
all I have.
much.
Yeah. Thanks, Rachel.
That is fantastic. All right, let me go ahead, and we have quite a few questions that have come through. I will preface everything that we're about to talk about with there are a lot of questions. Some of them are very specific to your own personal situation. And so we don't have the time here today. We only have about 15 minutes left of our presentation time set aside. So we don't have the time to go into individual tax stuff for the most part. So if you have individual tax questions, reach out to some of these resources that are available in your tax provider. Like those are the folks who are the experts on this. And so definitely won't necessarily get to every single nuanced tax thing here today. Also, same thing, advice for legal questions, you know, about your rights as a tenant or landlord, that sort of thing as well. I am going to start with some of our pre-submitted questions here, just because that's the perk of pre-submitting your questions is that we will get to them first. So Michelle, who I believe is a service provider, asked, how can other social service organizations best share this information with community members who would benefit? I think that's a great question for everybody. But Nan, do you have any suggestions of how best to share around this information going forward?
I think that might be a question for the folks at Revenue. I do know that we like to share, we at the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits and Minnesota Budget Project share a lot of the information we get from Department of Revenue about getting the word out to folks.
Mhm.
So maybe they might have more to say about what's the best things for that kind of getting the word out.
I see lots of folks from the Department of Revenue are hopping on this question quickly. It's fine. We can also move on. Oh, hi,
Can I
Jake.
jump in? And yeah,
Sure.
I don't have a, sorry, I was distracted a little bit. I don't have an answer to that question, but I do want to address something that we've seen pop up a couple of times in chat. So
Sure.
thank you for submitting all of those questions. I was in rapid fire answer mode, so hopefully double check to see if you did receive a response or if you have any follow-ups. I wanted to address the safe at home questions,
Sure.
specifically what to put on a CRP if you have a tenant who is a part of the safe at home program. Our guidance for that is to use the safe at home address, which is typically a PO box or some other form of mailing address for those folks when completing those CRPs. So that's what we have for you on that. I
Awesome.
also saw a bunch of questions about medical assistance and that being a portion of rent paid. Our understanding here is that there is a program that would pay the landlord directly a portion of that tenant's rent, and they would receive it and therefore hopefully know how much was paid on behalf of that tenant, and that amount would then be backed out of total rent paid or acknowledged on the CRP.
Yeah. So yeah, we are. Thank you for all of that, Jake. Yeah, I was going through some of the pre-submitted questions first and was getting to that. So yeah, obviously there's a lot of questions about like subsidies and Section 8 and other things going on here, which are complicating matters, right, into this whole thing. And so let's go quick through our pre-submitted ones quick. We just talked about safe at home. So then for uh, folks who, I guess for clarification in this, when it comes to rent paid, our fees, our utilities, those sorts of things, for like, a lot of tenants pay for their common area, utilities, a portion of them. Are those things part of the income that, or the rent, quote unquote, that landlords have to report in a CRP or not?
Any of my revenue colleagues want to jump in? Sorry, I'm managing too many things. I'm not even listening to the question, Rachel.
Okay. Basically, we're trying to determine what is considered rent. If a tenant pays, say, utilities, a portion of the common area utilities, in a separate from their rent that's charged, does that count towards the rent in the CRP when landlords are filing it or not? I don't know if
Yeah,
Pat or Jessica or anybody.
typically not. So typically not. I think the best way I can respond to that is if there's a amount stated in a lease agreement for a monthly rate and all things included in that rate, and it doesn't is not explicitly excluded on our list of do not include in rent, then yes, generally that would be included as rent paid. Again, sort of the two main things to pay attention to are, is it in a lease and does it break down what that one payment covers? Rent plus trash, water, sewer, blah, 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 right? And if it's not specifically excluded as not to be considered rent paid for the CRP.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. And I'm going to drop quick some the contact information for that Jessica provided for the Income Tax and Withholding Division for specific questions as well in the chat to everyone in case you've got other things that are coming up that we don't get to today. All right. Quick couple of things. So we talked a lot about how CRPs are split up between, roommates and household members. So just quickly, can you say repeat for folks who may have missed it a little bit, for folks who have multiple adults living in a household, how does the CRP get added? Is it only to like the head of household, or is it to everybody? Can you explain that real quick for folks again?
Yep, no problem. So the best rule of thumb is any adult renter living in the unit, regardless of how much rent they actually paid you, the amount of rent received in total for that unit should be split equally amongst all adult renters in that unit. So for those that have been doing this a while, this was a pretty big change that we made a few years ago, namely married taxpayers who were being issued one CRP with the total amount of rent paid, and we made a change that said split them up. So that's definitely an adjustment that folks have been making, and we've gotten a lot of feedback about it. So, but overall, it seems that the change accomplished what we needed it to, which was to clarify who gets what and what should be claimed on the return when they file. It also eliminated some awkward conversations from landlords trying to understand the marital status of their tenants. That was probably one of the biggest bits of external feedback that we got about that process.
Absolutely. All right. Let's see. Back up here. So for filing for e-services, if someone has a e-services account already, do they need to create a new one for this alone if their current account doesn't have anything to do with it? Or so if, say, you have a business, but then you also are a landlord in a separate way, do you have to create two accounts?
Pat, would you like to take
Yes.
that one? Thanks.
Yeah. So we have this spelled out on that e-services account types in the link there. But if the rental property is associated with a business, you would use that business's e-services account. So if you already have a business's e-services account, but it's not affiliated at all with the rental property, it's for a totally different business, then you wouldn't use it. You would sign up using an individual username. So it really depends on who owns or who's affiliated with the rental property. If it's the business, then yes, definitely use the business's e-services account. But if it's a rental property that's totally unrelated to the business, then you would sign up as an individual.
Gotcha. All right. And so when the multiple CRPs are issued, each tenant has to then file that on their taxes, however they file their taxes, right? When it comes to next year filing taxes, is what Angela's getting at in this particular question. Will each tenant have to file this on their own taxes? Nan, do you have I haven't pestered you enough yet.
Yeah. Could you repeat that question, please?
Yeah, sorry if I cut out. So for households that get multiple CRPs, excuse me, will each tenant have to file that on their taxes, come next year when they're filing this as part of their regular taxes?
So, when folks get their CRPs, yeah, they will take that to when they're filing their income taxes in the 2025 calendar year. And, the difference, there's a big sorry. I think one of the things that might be tripping people up is who is a household for tax purposes is often really different from how we think of it in our daily lives. So, the tax system can't tell the difference between, a couple, an unmarried couple, or people who are just roommates. But those kinds of household situations aren't responsible for filing their taxes together. So, each one of the roommates will file their own taxes, unmarried couple, each of them will file their own taxes. If they're a married couple and choose to file income taxes, married filing joint, then they'll file together. So it does kind of depend on their particular situation.
All right, thank you for that. So then let's see. Sorry, the questions are kind of shifting around as more added in, so I'm trying to clump questions that are similar together. So I appreciate that. So there was a couple of questions, I think, for clarification on if someone is a caretaker at the residence, how they kind of sort that out when they're when a landlord is filing a CRP.
Hoping Jessica can bail me out on this one. I'm not super buffed on the caretaker rent reduction stuff and what's all included in that. If not, we can always try and follow up with that person individually afterwards,
Sure,
Rachel.
absolutely.
And I'm sorry, I think I missed half the question.
So there was some clarification questions kind of throughout about how someone who's a caretaker, if they how they kind of how a landlord would show that on the CRP stuff, if there's and they're getting a rent reduction or anything like that, an employment, basically an employee who gets some sort of rent reduction as part of their employment package, I guess.
An employee. I think we'll have to follow up on that one.
So, okay, so it's not just necessarily the simple line 1, line 2 stuff that you were showing.
Yeah, line 2 is the caretaker rent reduction. But with the keyword employee in there, I might want to do some research on that piece.
Yeah, this is from someone named Shanika, who's specifically saying they have managers who receive rent credits or percentage off their rent, and whether that is considered. I guess it's more of what is the definition of a caretaker? Maybe that's a better question to ask.
Yeah, let's follow up on that one individually.
All right, thank you for that. So, good question, Shanika. You're stumping our experts. Always a good time. And so let's see. So just that's the same thing from anonymous. So then all right. So, okay, looks like there's a lot of couple of questions about public housing in Section 8, basically not having to file for the renter's credit as part of their taxes. They wouldn't be issued a CRP, is my understanding.
I can maybe speak to that
Sure.
on a high level.
Please do.
So think about, the renter's credit is not meant to act like a general housing support. It is meant to be a refund of estimated property taxes paid by that renter. So only people living in buildings that pay property taxes or a building that pays a payment in lieu of taxes are eligible. So someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I think some like government-owned housing is exempt from paying property taxes, but might pay a payment in lieu, which is when a building pays something to the local government to help fund public services. So it will depend on if it is a exempt property tax exempt property, it will depend on about whether they are paying some kind of property taxes to the local government to determine whether those tenants get a CRP, because it is meant to be a property tax refund not a general rent refund.
All right. I think that was honestly, a very elegant answer, Nan. Thank you. All right. So then we have, all right. So, and there's some general questions about how how a landlord would register essentially any sort of housing support. Basically, if the tenant doesn't pay all of their rent themselves, how a landlord registers that when giving the CRP is kind of how I'm understanding the thread of a lot of these particular questions, is that, rent, say rent is $1,000, that's what it says on the lease, but the tenant pays 500 of that, and then some other program pays the other 500. How does a landlord deal with that?
Yeah, so a lot of it is stuff we've sort of been alluding
Mhm.
to or chatting about, but the best rule of thumb is money coming to you directly from the tenant should be considered rent paid for that unit. If their rent is subsidized, regardless of where the source of those subsidies are coming from, if those are paid directly to you as the landlord, the renter had no control over those funds essentially, then that would not be included as part of rent paid. If, on the other hand, say they're getting some gifts from family members or community members, and that money is given to the renter to then make their choice, either pay rent or order food or whatever it is, that would be considered rent paid received from them and should be issued or should be included on the CRP. So again, rules of thumb here, I understand there's so many different situations that happen out in the world, and the best advice that we can give is follow the guidance that we've published in some of those resources. And if your situation falls between the lines on some of those, best thing to do is to give us a call and talk to folks about that here at Revenue to get it sorted out.
And the best place to contact is that
What you
individual.
posted in
Yep,
chat. Yeah,
perfect.
perfect.
All right. And I do see that it is 3:04 right now, so I apologize everybody for keeping us a little over. I thank everyone here for going through all of this information and for joining us today. It's a lot. Obviously, everyone is kind of shifting through these changes now. We're starting this process early. We want to get the information out there early on so that hopefully by the time everything is, set to go, I guess, for real, we've all had practice into it. And all of these frankly tough and complicated questions are getting answered. So again, thank you for everyone, Jake, Nan, Jessica, Pat. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us today. And we will see you all next month. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. Bye-bye.